Antifa's protecting drag shows for children, plus Texas's largest teachers union is calling parents extremists. I'm Brandon Waltons. This is the headline. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brandon Waltons, the managing editor of Texas Scorecard. We're going to talk about some of the big stories that happened in Texas this week, including some stories dealing with public education. You're not going to want to miss that. But first, this week, armed Antifa members guarded a drag show for kids in the conservative DFW suburb of Roanoke. Here to talk about that, we have the president of the Texas Family Project, Chris Hopper. Chris, thank you so much for joining. And you were at this event, right? It took place on Sunday in Roanoke at the Anderson Distillery and Grill. And you were there. What did you see?
Yeah, Brandon, thanks for having me on, by the way. We had this simple plan to show up to this event and simply ask questions to the families who were bringing their children to this drag show. And so when we showed up on the scene there at the Anderson Distillery, we were shocked, to be honest, because we saw dozens of these armed Antifa. They were aggressive. They were obnoxious. They were all the things you would imagine that the Antifa would be. And we were blown away. And so it got real heated. The police were called in. There were over capacity. Let's just say the event in Roanoke was a dumpster fire.
And about how many, if you can estimate, I mean, what was the amount of people like you that were there to protest the event versus people like these Antifa members who were there to, I guess, protect it or counter protest? Yeah.
So we probably had 25 or 30 people all told on the protesting side. And I would be willing to bet you that Antifa had us matched in numbers. And of course, the event was packed out. There was a waiting line to get in. So it just was a conglomeration of chaos. But I would say, to be safe, they at least had us matched person for person.
I think the thing that struck me seeing pictures and video from this event was that, you know, Roanoke is in an area that is surrounded by a lot of churches, right? I mean, you've got a lot of little suburbs around there. You know, where were the churches?
Well, before the event happened, Brandon, we reached out to all the major churches in Roanoke. We tried our best to contact them. We called them out on Twitter, asking for them to be the voice. When we showed up on Sunday for this event, not only were there no pastors present, there were no representation for any of the churches in Roanoke. So it was basically a handful of activists who care about the family, and they care about the sexualization of children, and a group or two like ours who were there to support the family. It was absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, very, very concerning, right? To see those kind of numbers. Why do you think that this isn't the first drag queen show for kids that we've seen in Texas? Why do you think the left has started using these even as recently as just the last few months?
Well, I think it's safe to say that they're being subversive, that their goal is a dark, disgusting goal. I believe they are, I hate to use the word groomer, Brandon, because it has become such a cliche in these circles, but what else do you call organizations that will host sexually explicit? I don't care if they called it PG. They'll host these sexually explicit events where grown men dressed in provocative dress, twerking with kids, twerking around kids, taking money from children. I can't think of a better word to use than groomer. And I wish there were a deeper vocabulary. I've run out of the right words to use, but I think it's subversive, Brandon. I think they are doing this. They are undermining the family. I think they are sexualizing children. And if pastors and churches don't start taking a stand, this will happen in every major city in our great state.
We've got some of these drag shows, even one being held at a so-called church in Katy later this month. What is your organization's recommendation for concerned citizens who do want to go speak out and they want to end these?
Well, this is still the land of the free, the home of the brave. We still have the right to protest and make our voices heard. We obviously want local people involved. We want pastors to step up and take a stand and let their voices be heard. We want every organization that has any type of influence in the state of Texas and beyond to show up to these events. We do not come brandishing weapons. We do not come with an aggressive undertone. We simply show up on the scene, ask questions, and try to get a better handle on what's happening in our state. All we are doing is desiring for conversation, but is absolutely, it's appalling that more churches and more concerned citizens of Texas aren't showing up.
And real quick, for people who want to follow Texas Family Project, where can they do that?
They can follow us on all platforms at Family Project TX. We're encouraging folks, of course, to go to texasfamilyproject.com, sign the pledge, consider supporting us, join the fight.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Brandon.
Well, public education continues to dominate the news here in Texas. Just this week, parents are enjoying a victory as they push back against a State Board of Education proposal that would have added radical curriculum changes to the social studies standards here in Texas. Here to talk about that and some other public education related stories, we have Michael Quinn Sullivan. Michael, always nice when you can join us here, find your way back to the old 1836 studios.
Yeah, great to be with this morning. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to talk, we've got some stories from this week up at TexasScorecard.com, a lot of them dealing with public education. Some of them are pretty heart-wrenching. We'll talk about those in a few moments, but I want to start on a positive note here, which is this victory we've seen from parents, where the State Board of Education was set to approve this radical curriculum changes that would have added, LGBT pride, talking about kind of globalist philosophies, getting rid of Texas history in elementary school. A lot of proposals that parents fought back against. And this week, they really saw a victory.
Yeah, I think it's significant. It is very significant. You cannot understate the significance of what happened. Number one, the SBOE, the State Board of Education, is this entity that most of us just ignore, Brandon. There are 15 of them. They're elected in geographic districts around the state, essentially double the size of a state Senate district, therefore double the size of a congressional district. These are big geographic areas. And most of us would be hard-pressed to name our own SBOE member, let alone anyone else on the board. Okay. So then second is TEKS rewrites. So we're talking about the Texas Central Knowledge and Skills. That kind of defines the curriculum.
TEKS.
Texas Central Knowledge and Skills. That kind of defines the curriculum for the state and sets the standards by which classroom education takes place. Those things, they will spend several years in rewriting and poll testing among teachers and among so-called stakeholders and textbook writers and other things, so that we were really late in the stage here for the rewrite of the social studies textbooks. There are a lot of folks out there who have been for the past couple of years kind of trying to ring the alarm bell about this, and for whatever kind of the various causes going on in the world over the past year. So this time round, parents took notice and started speaking out. And I think for a lot of people, there was kind of the hope, Brandon, that, maybe, the big win could possibly be if some of the more egregious things were taken out. And maybe if we got a semester of Texas history put back in. That was, I think, kind of the tyranny of low expectations. Instead, because of the sheer number, you had Grassroots America, We the People, Joanne Fleming's group in East Texas. You had the True Texas Project. You had Apollos on Education. You had just this big series of activists out there talking about this showing up at the SBOE, something that never happens, activists showing up at SBOE meetings. And so instead of just kind of the low expectation, nibble around the edges and slow the leftward tide, instead, we saw the SBOE wave the white flag. They ditched this rewrite effort until 2015. That's a huge win, giving time for maybe some legislators to make some fixes in state law, and more importantly, for citizens to make some fixes on the State Board of Education.
Yeah, and you certainly saw a lot of those parents, a lot of those activists that have been on the front lines of this issue celebrating. But as soon as this decision was made, you saw the Texas State Teachers Association, all right? This is the oldest and largest teachers lobby, teachers union rather, in Texas.
Affiliated with the National Education Agency Association.
Yes, they came out and they said that essentially the parents that were fighting back against this curriculum were extremists, and they characterized the whole thing as a, quote, attack on teachers. I mean, the absolute dissonance between what they're saying and what we're seeing from parents is astounding. And it's also amazing because it's not too far off from what we saw with the National School Board Association last year, where they compared parents to terrorists. I mean, is this how these people think?
Well, it's how they think, and I think they can maybe shame parents into shutting up. And look, let's also be real clear here. We've talked a lot about the citizen activists and the parents. There were a lot of teachers who were very upset by these curriculum changes. A lot of retired teachers and others who were speaking up, feeding information, helping the grassroots understanding the impact of this stuff. So the so-called Teachers Association, the teachers union, what they try to use the language of an attack on teachers. No, this is an attack on leftist ideology, being shoved down the throats of Texas kids and Texas teachers, quite honestly. It's very fascinating. I mean, you have the TSTA comes out and they want to attack parents for being engaged in their kids' education, but yet, the horrifying things we've seen go on this week and in the past several months of teachers being arrested for sexually abusing kids, molesting their students, attacking students physically, predatory behavior by teachers. TSTA has been silent and all that. So they're more than quick to go after parents who have who want the best for their kids, and yet they're silent about predators who are harming children literally in the classroom.
Well, and we saw a couple examples of that come out just over the last week. Aaron Anderson, a senior journalist up in DFW, has been covering these stories pretty heavily. One out of Prosper ISD, where you had a case where a bus driver was allegedly molesting a student on the bus, and the district knew about it and kind of wanted to quash the story. And then
literally, you had the superintendent telling staff, "Hey, quick, go to the Special Olympics this weekend and take pictures so we can flood social media with happy clappy things and squelch this." I mean, horrific behavior. Where clearly the best interests of the kid and the children involved were not a question. It was all about protecting the image of the school district.
Right. And it's not too different then from a story that comes out literally just days after that story, where you have a teacher in Allen ISD up in the Metroplex who has been indicted, been arrested for alleged sex crimes. And this was a teacher that was apparently investigated by the district earlier this year, and they let him back in the classroom.
Yeah, and then again, you go back a couple, just a few weeks before all this, you had a guy who sets up decoys and catches predators who are trying to set up sex rendezvous with children. You had a middle school teacher show up thinking he was going to meet up with a 13-year-old boy to have sex with him. Again, someone his kid's age, the students say teacher's age. You have all these instances out there, and things that in the past might have just been swept under the rug are now being exposed. And you would think that an organization like the Texas State Teachers Association would want to draw a real clear, clean line, saying this kind of behavior is not acceptable. Professional teachers don't behave this way. Instead, we get this deafening silence from the TSTA.
Well, and as you see more and more of these stories come out, I mean, I think it's no wonder why we're seeing this resurgence in Texas, at least, but nationwide, for more school choice, right? We saw that in Arizona. We've seen it in other states, and certainly there's been a movement here. Governor Greg Abbott has said he wants to do that. And I think, when you look at these stories coming out, I think every time one of these stories come out, more and more parents, I think, are saying, I want out.
Yeah, and look, all this is also going to create an interesting question for members of the Texas legislature, particularly Republican members of the Texas legislature, because you have Greg Abbott saying, okay, time for do school choice finally. You've got, the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who's always been on that position. And so you've got the Republican Party of Texas, you've got all these kind of things out there pushing loud for more school choice and more accountability in public education. Meanwhile, the Republican Speaker of the Texas House, endorsed by the Texas State Teachers Association, which not only has taken all these kind of weird business we talked about, but they oppose school choice, they oppose more parental involvement, and they've endorsed Republican House Speaker Dade Phelan. So now Republicans in the Texas legislature are going to have to ask themselves, is that who they want? And it's not like he passively received their endorsement. He's been bragging about their endorsement, advertising their endorsement. So again, that's going to create some interesting dynamics for Republicans heading into 23, who have made a lot of bold promises about the things they're going to accomplish. And the TSTA is standing against all those things.
And it's going to be interesting to see who wins out. And I know that, right now the legislature goes back in January, but right now is the time people need to be calling their lawmakers about the issues they care about. So Thank you for joining, Michael. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us. If this is your first time you're watching us on YouTube, maybe you haven't done it already, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can be notified every time we go live here at Texas Scorecard. Right now, thank you for joining. Have a great weekend.
So our marketing team tells us that everybody loves videos of cats.
Not everyone.
Well, maybe not everyone. But if you love cat videos, if you love liberty, and if you love getting your most trusted political news from anywhere in the state, we're inviting you to subscribe to Texas Scorecard. Now, you might not actually see any videos of cats in our content, but you will see videos that help you stay informed and up to date on the most recent shenanigans from the litter box Capitol down in Austin. So subscribe to our YouTube channel today, click the bell, and become an informed citizen.